It's so important for us to understand that what Jesus has been talking about in this kingdom all along, he's been saying, friends, we got to reorient everything we believe and everything we think about, because our culture is telling us something that is so opposite of what Jesus called the kingdom of heaven. Paul took it to a real extreme. Kind of blows my mind. Paul would talk about, later in his letters, he would talk about Jesus' crucifixion. Now, crucifixion in that day was an act of terrorism. Terrorism is when people use violence and death to frighten a population, and that's exactly what crucifixion was. They would strip a person naked, put them up on a cross or nail them to the walls of the city or something like that, and they wouldn't kill them fast. They'd make sure they strung it out and made it long and torturous and to make it as painful to death as possible, just so the whole populace could see how powerful they were and how terrible this would be. And when Paul's talking about this in the book of Colossians, he says something so bizarre and so strange. He says, when Jesus was on the cross, he defeated the principalities and powers. Now, when he said that in that case, he was talking about the government. He said, when Jesus was on the cross, he defeated the Roman government and said, and he held them up as a spectacle. Now think about that. The whole culture saying we hold this man up as a spectacle. Paul says, no. Jesus, in choosing a different kind of power, a different kind of authority, held the faux authority, the Roman, held it up and exposed it as a spectacle. It's so important for us to understand that what Jesus has been talking about in this kingdom all along, he's been saying, friends, we got to reorient everything we believe and everything we think about, because our culture is telling us something that is so opposite of what Jesus called the kingdom of heaven. So I know what the Romans were thinking. They might have been too shocked to be insulted at the time. I don't know. But there would have been a lot of the Jewish people who were gathered around Jesus. A lot of them might have made the connection. Certainly our scholars did. Because centuries before, there was a prophet named Zechariah. And Zechariah wrote these words. He said, rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Zion is named for Jerusalem. Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Sing out loud, daughter Jerusalem. Look, your king will come to you. He is righteous, he is victorious, and he is humble. And riding on a donkey, on a colt, the offspring of a donkey. He will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the war horse from Jerusalem. The bow used in battle will be broken. He will speak peace to the nations. That's an imagery throughout the Old Testament, the battle bow, where the bow is taken and the bow is broken. And that's a constant image. There's a meme now I really like, I see online, where it's a meme of Jesus with a modern weapon doing that. So he's saying, the prophet was saying, so this one who rides on a donkey is going to bring down the powers? Is going to break the battle weapons? What in the world does this mean? I know that when we read these kind of things, these kind of great historical encounters that Jesus was having and what he was saying, is we kind of think, well, what does that have to do with me? What does that have to do with you? You know that our job, our task in interpreting the Bible is always that we try to find out what Jesus or what the prophets or what the writers were saying at the time and what it meant in that time, and then how does it apply to us? But I think when it comes to this story, if I were to say, what does this have to do with me? I'd have to say it has everything to do with me. Everything to do with us, and everything to do with how we live every single day. Because Jesus is teaching us a different way of looking at God, looking at ourselves, looking at the world, and giving our allegiance to a different kingdom, not the kingdoms of this world, but what he called the kingdom of heaven. Now, Paul would write about this, but Jesus did the most speaking about it. But Paul would write about it too. And there's a passage that we read, and I want us to look at it again, where Paul talked about a weakness of his. Paul, man, he was quite a man. He after his acceptance of Christ, The guy would take unbelievable risks, he felt, following God, and he paid dearly. Sometimes he was beaten. In that day, when they beat somebody, they used to do the 39 lashes because Laura said that 40 would kill you, so we just want the guy to suffer. And that happened to him more than once. So his back had probably been laid open so many times in that day, no medical stuff. He probably was all scarred up. They tried to stone him to death a couple times. He'd been in shit. I don't know how the guy could walk. We have a football injury and we can hardly get around. The guy's body was just decimated. And he gets toward the end of his life and he says, I prayed for the Lord to remove from me this weakness. He called it a thorn in the flesh. So, we've kind of surmised that it must have been something physical. But when I think of how beat up the guy was, he was probably saying, there's one thing that if I could just get rid of this, then I could do what I'm supposed to do, Lord. I've been trying to tell people about you. I've been trying to do this. If you just took care of this, we could keep going. And he said, I begged God. He said, on 3 occasions I begged God. And here's what he felt like the Lord said to him. He said to me, my grace is enough for you because my power is perfected in your weakness. He goes on, we read it, well, I can even rejoice about my weaknesses. He says, because when I am weak, then I am strong. The whole upside downness of the kingdom of heaven. Now, here's the thing in my life, so many times when I've looked at Paul's words and all that, I took it as Paul's weakness God could overcome because Paul was like, Paul, I'm not Paul. Paul is Paul, no wonder. But I think I totally misinterpreted it as making it just a physical thing. In Jesus' Beatitudes, he said, blessed are the poverty-stricken in spirit. Blessed are the people who just feel clueless. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. He was talking about any kind of weakness. You see, God wants to be in our lives in such a way that Christ uses us in our weaknesses, and our weaknesses become strength. And that's not just physical weakness, it's physical, it's emotional, it's psychological, it's spiritual weakness, it's relational weakness. All of these things can be places where we give to God and his strength does something. Spiritual weakness. We all have spiritual weaknesses, don't we? If we say no, we're liars, and everybody knows we're liars, okay? And I used to think that, no, that's not the weakness that God can. I've got to get strong spiritually. I've got to get mastery over all my temptations. I've got to be this spiritual giant. Then God could use me. And that's just falling into the old trap of Augustus. Oh, when you're strong, then God could use you. Strength is might. Now he said, in your weakness, his strength is perfected. That's this thing that Jesus always talked about. My favorite one of his parables is the one that's about 2 sentences long, where he says, the kingdom of heaven is like a small measure of yeast that's put in bread. You can't see it, but it changes the very structure of the bread. And Jesus is teaching us that his people in this world, who no one ever notices, and no one reads about in the papers, are the leaven that is changing the very fabric of this world because Jesus said this kingdom is advancing. It is not presidents, it is not corporations, it is not generals, it is not billionaires who bring about the kingdom. Not at all. It is the kingdom of heaven in us that takes everything and turns it upside down and says, my power is perfected in your weakness. It's not just power weakness, it's great and small. It's great and small. Sometimes when we're trying to live authentically, the Sermon on the Mount, we're trying to live authentically, turning the other cheek. We're trying to live authentically, to be peacemakers. We feel like we're in the minority. One of my spiritual heroes, St. Francis of Assisi, says, that's where we're supposed to be. In the minority, because in our fewness, his strength is multitude. In our smallness, his strength is huge. In our weakness, his strength is perfected.